Hello, folks. Welcome to the Crime Dawg podcast. I'm your host, Johnny FIORICA, 30-year veteran, retired with the Rochester, New York Police Department. Sitting alongside me, also a detective, retired with the Rochester, New York Police Department, David SIMPSON. Folks, we sit before you today with a wealth of knowledge and a ton of experience. But if you want to know what we did, you can check out our bios on our website, thecrimedawgpodcast.com, or you could check our bios out on our YouTube channel. David, welcome to the podcast, brother.
Happy to be here.
David, so, we would be remiss if we didn't talk about January 6th because it went down a few years ago, but obviously it's January and I want to talk about it again. The funny thing is you and I want to start out by saying that we had a spirited discussion, mainly you and Brett Zabreski on Twitter after I replied to a Rachel Barnhart tweet. Shout out to Rachel. She's a friend of our pod. She's definitely going to be on again. Regarding January 6th, she put out a tweet about January 6th. I replied to it only with a chart, a comparison chart. And when I did that, it was a comparison chart between the original January 6th incident and the BLM riots. And some person responded, and I say some person because based on their Twitter name, I don't know if they're a male or a female. And
they had about 40 followers, so it could have been.
Yeah, 5 followers. So I didn't, like I said, I'm not trying to be politically correct. I don't know who it's a person. I don't know if it's a male or a female. Anyways, I dropped the thing responding to Rachel, and the person responds something to the effect of, "That's a false meme. You're all in a kiddie cult." And I did what I usually do. I don't try to instigate. I say, cool. Hey, thanks for sharing. Oh, by the way, if you want to come on our podcast or you want to call in or come on our live show, let us know. And obviously there's crickets. You got no response when you talk about somebody that doesn't have the balls to come on and back up what they're saying against you. Again, we call them keyboard warriors. But the funny thing is, you and Brett Zabreski, for those that don't know, Brett is also retired. He's a sergeant with us. He's got an extensive police history. He fills in for David when David has things to do. But you and Brad piled on this guy, and this guy didn't know which way you guys were going to hit him with. You performed verbal surgery on this dude, and I kind of laughed my butt off watching that go on. David, January 6th, brother, this thing is a colossal failure. I mean, this whole thing regarding January 6th. I mean, you still have, I was watching local news last couple of days. They're talking about January 6th. I mean, they still, what they call it, the insurrection. They label this as a threat to the democracy. I mean, let me start out, David, if you don't mind. Do you mind if I read what I put on Twitter?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I got this from somewhere, somehow, but it was a comparison between January 6th and the BLM riots, which, by the way, January 6th was one incident contained to one area. There was like 500 plus BLM riots all over the country. So that's the first thing. January 6th lasted a couple hours. The BLM riots, 7 months. January 6th, 0 murders. BLM riots, 20 plus murders. January 6th, no small businesses destroyed. BLM riots, hundreds of small businesses destroyed. January 6th, 1 federal building damaged. BLM riots, 150 plus federal buildings damaged. January 6th, monetary damage, 1.5 million. That's with an M. BLM riots, $1 to $2 billion in damage, and that's with a B. Protesters kept in solitary confinement, some of them, for January 6th. All the BLM riots and protesters were bailed out. January 6th, encouraged by fringe political groups and agitators, the BLM riots encouraged by legit elected politicians and the media. January 6th, exaggerated by the media, BLM downplayed by the media. January 6th, national outrage, according to some, BLM riots, national encouragement. David, what says you about my little thing that caused a Twitter riot?
Well, first of all, as far as the January 6th, that what I got back at that keyboard warrior was the fact that I Googled various articles, most of which were from lefty publications,
Right,
that backed up those statistics. So if you want to do the research, just use the Googles. It comes up pretty easy.
yeah.
The first thing I want to say is that, and by no means are we saying that what took place at the Capitol building wasn't wrong, that people shouldn't have been arrested, that damaged properties, that did get in physical confrontations with Capitol Police. We're not saying that. Those people should have been arrested. They should have been prosecuted for damaging stuff. What we're talking about is the vast majority of people that set foot inside the Capitol were trespassing, and they didn't damage anything, and they didn't assault anyone, and yet they were still prosecuted federally, in my opinion, excessively, in comparison to other people that have trespassed through protest at the Capitol. That's the big grievance I have with how January 6th is portrayed, and the big lie that comes out with every politician's tweet, mostly from the Democrat side, is that a number of law enforcement officers, police officers, Capitol Police were killed due to January 6th. That is a lie. Not one officer of the Capitol Police was killed as a direct result of January 6th or anything done that day.
Yeah.
And Brian Sicknick, who is an officer who did die, God rest his soul, he died by natural causes. And that is I'm going to read it just so everyone that jumps on us. U.S. Capitol Police released a statement that read, the United States Capitol Police accepts the findings of the District of Columbia's Office of the Chief Medical Examiner that Officer Brian Sicknick died of natural causes. Died of a stroke after January 6th. Not related. So some things need to be set straight, but I also needed to say that not by no means are we saying that what everyone did that day should be like no big deal. Not saying that.
Yeah, and the thing is we're not trying to bring up old wounds, but actually the left-leaning media is talking about January 6th because obviously Trump's inauguration's coming up and they got to rehash things because this is their only thing to cling on to. You know, the interesting thing that we talked about this on our live show on iHeartRadio. The Christopher Wray testified in front of a House committee a couple years ago and was like, no, we didn't have any FBI guys undercover. You and I talked extensively on our radio show where we knew at the time that there was confidential informants or CIs or CSs, confidential sources, however you want to label them. They were inside the crowd. And you and I discussed ad nauseum on our radio show explaining to our audience that when you have CSs or CIs are the same thing, but you have informants working for you as a law enforcement arm, whether it's at the federal level or local level, they work for you. They work at your discretion. You direct them and tell them what to do. Christopher Wray was asked the question, and he wasn't asked the next question. They asked if there was any undercover FBI guys. He said no. Now, whether that's the truth or not, I don't know. But they didn't ask the next question, I don't believe, which was the FBI, did they have any informants on the ground, which they definitely did. And this came out a couple months ago. There's multiple sources where they admitted that they had FBI informants and sources on the ground. You and I personally think, and we're not conspiracy theorists, we think that those informants were part of the instigation arm of the January 6th incident. And it's just so funny that the FBI claims that there was no one undercover, but you and I both know because you and I had extensive informants that we utilized over the course of our careers, and they literally do not do anything unless we direct them to do it and how to do it. Right, David?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, a perfect example is if someone asked if, we were inside of a drug house, our answer would be no. But if we have an informant that we sent into a drug house to gain intelligence, that's the same as us being in there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's literally, they work for us, like you said. They're under the direction and control of us. They are paid by us, or they're working off charges that we hold over their head. So it's a cute way to do a nice little dance that Christopher Wray did. Good for him. But there's clearly more to the story, I guess, is the main point, that the FBI had a number of boots on the ground via confidential sources.
Yeah, and the second thing we wanted to talk about regarding January 6th was the upcoming inauguration of Trump. I think this is a huge safety and security risk for not only Trump, but those in attendance. I mean, this guy, Trump, had 2 assassination attempts, possibly 3 if you count that one that they said, oh, no, he was a supporter. Anyways, there was 2 assassination attempts on President Trump's life leading up to the election in November of 2024. But doing security details like this is just a monumental task for local, state, and federal law enforcement. David, you and I were on specialized teams. You were on SWAT. I was on hostage for many years. I know through my experience, you have more experience tactically relative to SWAT. I know there was a couple different presidents that came in over the course of my career. From the hostage end, I had nothing to do with that, but our SWAT guys had a lot to do with working with the Secret Service and presidential details, making sure that the dignitary, the president, when he came into town in Rochester in upstate New York, was protected.
The inauguration is definitely a nightmare for securing it and keeping the attendees safe. It's, open air like that, such a vast area, so many people. It'd be much easier if it was inside like an arena and you could control the environment, control entry points. You couldn't get anything overhead, so to speak, drones or anything like that. It's a very scary and very dangerous setting. I'm actually quite nervous about it. Whether you're on the right or the left, an attack on our president is horrific to the democracy of our country. And they got a nightmare situation. And the thing I'm most concerned about is the thing that I've noticed when I was a part of this stuff is the comms were really decent, good. I mean, that's communication between the multi-agencies that are working together, whether it was a Secret Service, whether it was local law enforcement, the FBI, everyone could talk and communicate. And one of the things that came out in the Pennsylvania incident on President Trump is the comms were terrible. There wasn't that ability to talk freely amongst different agencies. There was a delay. That's hugely problematic. And in a setting like this, you're going to have so many people watching and keeping control of it and security that you need great comms. And then you have to have these interagencies that seamlessly work together. And that is it's a difficult thing in a huge setting like that.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about communications, and you and I were very lucky. You and I worked with the ATF guys. Mike Curran and Mark Lee do a great job when we're doing a big takedown. It's nowhere near, and please don't think I'm comparing it, but when we do a pretty big takedown on a large-scale investigation, when we used to work for the federal government, it was imperative that the comms and everybody was on the same page. Obviously, on the Fed side, they have satellite radios that are encrypted, and that was the form of communication that we used when we were working as task force officers for the federal government. The failure in Pennsylvania was the comms. They said it, they admitted it, but it's imperative that law enforcement all is on the same page relative to being able to communicate threats that they see when they're going on live. There can't be a delay. Seconds count when you're protecting somebody like the President of the United States. Seconds count when you're protecting anybody. But yeah, so David, we wanted to talk about our experiences. I never did a presidential detail relative to tactical. Obviously I did a bunch of personal protection with high profile CEOs and also sports celebrities, a ton when they came to town. But this is nowhere comparative to what I did.
The big thing that I wished is they changed the venue. The venue it's so difficult to control.
Yeah,
that it's almost impossible to totally control it. We're on a smaller scale, which is a much more easy area to control. And people have to understand that comms, it's not sexy, but most of these agencies, whether it be federal, state, local, the SWAT teams, the tactics are great. These people are trained. They know how to shoot. Their tactics are fine. The comms is the weak point, because if you can't communicate what you're seeing, or if you don't know what's going on, you're not all on the same page, things break down very rapidly. So, it seems like not a big thing, and it's being able to communicate. We knew from when we worked undercover or did stuff, if you lose radio contact, you're like lost in space.
Yeah.
It's a huge deal, and I hope they get it squared away, and it's definitely going to be a huge security point of consternation, if you will, for many people that are in the know, because I want to see how they pull it off.
Yeah. Hey, David, what was the line when we worked the streets when we get in a foot chase, right? You can't outrun the radio. Right. You can't outrun the radio. When you put a bunch of cops in an area, even if it's 4 or 5 communicating with a radio, everyone's on the same page, that person or suspect running away ain't going to get fired in usually most situations. Right. Well, folks, listen, if you liked this episode, please click like and subscribe on our YouTube channel. That's at Crime Dawg Podcast, at Crime Dawg Podcast. If you can't get enough of us, please tune in to our live radio show every week on iHeartRadio. That's Saturdays noon to 1. We welcome all callers on that show. They're live and unscreened calls. But thanks for listening to the Crime Dawg Podcast. We hope you stick with us for future episodes. But like my brother-in-law, Frankie Grassi, says, if you can't make it, who cares?